COVID-19 tips sponsored by Dex Soap. 1. Practice social distancing. 2. Wear your mask when leaving the house. 3. Wash your hands regularly for 20 seconds using our Dex Soap. 4. Cover your nose and mouth with a disposable tissue or flex elbow when you cough or sneeze. Choose Dex Soap for that extra cleanliness. Dex Soap is affordable and available nationwide.
It is now 19 hours 30 all across Guyana, and it is time to enter room 592 after a very eventful day this evening, at the helm of the program, as usual, Dr. Yog Mahadeo and his loyal co-host, senior journalist of Kaitri News, Mr. Leonard Gildarie, and their esteemed guest this evening, retired Brigadier Mark Phillips, Prime Ministerial candidate. Good evening, gentlemen. Stop the music.
Yes, I will say good afternoon and good evening to my co-host, Mr. Leonard Gildarie. How are you, sir?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's a little cold in the studio here today, but good night to our esteemed guests this evening, and of course to you, my co-host.
Great. Well, I'm surprised that it is cold in the studios, which means you're getting the cold treatment from the APNU AFC cabal, and I wouldn't be surprised given our daytime show what's been happening here, Leonard. But you know, I would have thought it would have gotten a little hot for you, my friend. I'm surprised it's getting cold. But who else to talk about the hot and the cold of the political battle other than a brigadier who is in the room 592 tonight? Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're joining us from, all across the world, let me say a welcome to you all to room 592, where we unleash the truth. And let me take a moment to acknowledge viewers and listeners. Leonard, yesterday our brothers and sisters from the BVI were saying, hey, yo, Leonard, you didn't hail us. So we wish to say a special hello to the BVI crew, to the St. Kitts, Nevis, Suriname, and ladies and gentlemen, all across the Quarantine Coast and Nickerie. Welcome to this room 592. For the first time, I think you are seeing it rebroadcast and streamed on your television screens there. And let me say a big thank you to the television station owners for carrying this broadcast there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome to room 592, where we unleash the truth. And tonight, we're privileged to have Mr. Mark Phillips, Prime Minister-elect for Guyana, retired brigadier. And, you know, I don't want to introduce him as a brigadier before we get into a war of words, and you would not want to get into any kind of war with any brigadier who was recently
You used to rhyme words, Yog. You got to make it very, very clear. You used to rhyme some word that sound familiar
Yes.
to Brigadier.
Yes. But you know, Leonard, I have become battered and bruised over the last 141 days with words that makes no sense coming from some brigadiers and some generals and some people. But tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure we're going to change that tune and hear some words of wisdom from Mr. Mark Phillips. Ladies and gentlemen, just before I welcome and ask for the comments from Mr. Phillips, let me remind you that today has been a very eventful day, as Kevin Smith reminded us. Today, the Court of Appeal had its administrative session in which it outlined how many minutes persons are going to talk for and by what time they need to send in their written applications and written documents and so forth, what font they must use and what size of font and stuff like that. I want to remind you all, the font approved was not Comic Sans. There are specific fonts. And no jokes, ladies and gentlemen, I do not mean that in any way as a slight to the court. I respect very much what the court has to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we do know that on Saturday, the Court of Appeal will listen to the oral arguments, the oral presentations from the various parties. And on Saturday itself, the Court of Appeal will inform this nation as to what date it will be ready to hand down its decision. We do know also, and this is not from the Court of Appeal, we do know based on our last night's discussion, ladies and gentlemen, with Mr. Christopher Ram and Mr. Selwyn Peters, that unfortunately we are in a very unique situation where the applicant at the Court of Appeal is appealing something that the Court of Appeal had decided on before. So it seems like they're hoping for a miracle where they're asking the Court of Appeal to overturn a Court of Appeal's decision. Because, mind you, ladies and gentlemen, the lower court did not make a decision on certain things because it was already determined by a higher court. And so it was raised judicata. However, we get into more of that legal discussion on another time. Tonight, however, ladies and gentlemen, again, we welcome Brigadier Mark Phillips. Sir, welcome to Room 592. This is your first venture here, and I hope you don't find it an easy venture, sir.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Yog. Thank you, Leonard.
Thanks, sir.
And it's nice to be here again on another interview. It's the first time in 592, but we linked up before and we did an interview before.
Let me say to you, Brigadier.
Don't get too confused with the Brigadier. I am Mark Phillips. In a previous life, I used to be in the military and I attained the rank of Brigadier and the appointment of Chief of Staff of the Guyana Defense Force. I retired in October 2016. I became a politician in January 2020 when I accepted to run on the slate of the People's Progressive Party Civic as the prime ministerial candidate. So I'm politician Mark Phillips, citizen Mark Phillips, Mr. Mark Phillips, or just Mark Phillips.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated, much obliged. Let me just say congratulations on your presentations yesterday at the OAS. I think that, Guyana was, at least a majority of the electorates were well represented by yourself and Mr. Anand Nandlal at the OAS. And sir, we want to start with that. 21 countries. 21 countries and not a single country stood on the side of the APNO AFC. For politics aside, sir, politics aside, it must have been a humbling and embarrassing position to sit there and see every country in the modern world criticize your country for its stance on elections, sir.
Well, actually, that wasn't embarrassing to me.
Okay.
What was embarrassing yesterday was the two ministers of government, or the two people who continue to hold on to ministerial titles, lying about what is happening in Guyana. That was embarrassing.
Indeed, sir, indeed. And you mentioned that. I just want to, what was your thought? What were you and your colleague, Mr. Nandlal, thinking about at that moment when Basil Williams misrepresented the CCJ's decision, sir?
Well, as I said, it was embarrassing, but the good thing is that we had an opportunity to speak.
Yes.
Just went there to listen. We had an opportunity to speak, and Mr. Nandlal did use the opportunity to dispel the misrepresentation by Mr. Williams there. Mm-hmm. The reality is, look, the entire world is informed and updated, perhaps hourly, by what is happening in Guyana.
Yes.
And yesterday, you know what was good about yesterday? The only item on the agenda for that meeting yesterday was Guyana. Mm-hmm. Here is the OAS, the Permanent Council of the OAS, decided to put aside whatever pressing business they had to spend the time and discuss Guyana, the political situation in Guyana. And I'm thankful for the Permanent Council of the OAS, led by the Secretary General of the OAS, Mr. Almagro, for doing that for us.
Absolutely.
And secondly, not only being the only agenda item, all the speakers, as you know, they put aside diplomacy and they hit to the point with a high degree of accuracy
Yes.
and express in no uncertain terms, in the shortest time, their views and what their concerns are as it pertains to what is happening in Guyana. It started with a presentation by former Prime Minister Bruce Golding. As you know, he was the head of the observer mission from the OAS to Guyana. And that presentation was on point, accurate. There's nobody, as far as I'm concerned, can convince me otherwise, because I lived through it and I listened to his presentation and I know that he was on point, he was accurate to his presentation. He represented exactly what happened in Guyana in the run-up to the election day and what transpired in the days following the elections on the March the 2nd in Guyana.
Correct.
All those diplomats were clear. Use the recount results and declare the winners of the elections as early as possible. Early as possible. So what presentation Mr. Williams made there, it is clear what the Permanent Council position is on Guyana.
And I think they also said, ladies and gentlemen, stop using the courts, stop using the judiciary to delay this process. So Prime Minister elect is absolutely right, ladies and gentlemen, that the world has seen and is seeing as things unfold in Guyana what is happening here. Sir, if you don't mind, I want this was I believe it was a little bit of a foosball moment at the OAS hearing yesterday when you and your colleague Mr. Nandlal, a demand was made for your retraction of the word dishonest. And it was a silent worthy of notice that demand was not adhered to by neither by you nor Mr. Nandlal. I don't know if you recall the moment when Dr. Cummings said that the demand that you withdraw the statement that of a dishonest Mr. Granger.
Well, there was no need to withdraw any statement, and we deliberately decided not to withdraw what we said, because we all experienced that with Mr. Granger. He says one thing, and he does something totally different. And you know what? Is that one occasion? Many occasions. And I don't want to recall all the, the examples of the occasions when he be doing that. I think every Guyanese who's following the politics in Guyana now is aware of the shifting or changing narrative of the APNU AFC position from March 2nd through the recount process to now. And we all arrive at one conclusion, that the architect of what is happening and the positions and the changing positions of the APNU AFC is Mr. Granger.
Yeah.
Others are, you know, some people call them minions, but I would say the others are his lieutenants, and maybe some are senior, so you could give him the rank of captain.
So, Mr. Phillips, I want to discuss that point a little bit more, if you don't mind, sir. But just before we do, let me remind our viewers and listeners, we are live on Facebook. We are live all across the country via radio, 99.1 FM, 99.5 FM, ladies and gentlemen. You could join us on various television broadcasts that are carrying this stream as we speak, especially in quarantine with Channel 19. I also wish to acknowledge our brothers and sisters in the US and Canada that's carrying this by live stream. And let me also tell you good news. Our YouTube link is back up, so you can get us on YouTube, and you can also go on the Kaitor News website, and you could see our live feed going on there. So let us get back to our discussion. Mr. Phillips, sir, many up to recently would have thought that Mr. Granger seems to be under the control of some persons, but as of the last fortnight, it is becoming more and more clear that he is he is the likely intellectual author behind a lot, if not all, of these things. At least he cannot claim to be ignorant of them. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I fully agree with that. As I said just now, he is the architect, and we have seen him in operation on many occasions. And let us recall one instance where everybody in Guyana perhaps is aware of. Mr. Arthur, former Prime Minister of Barbados, Owen Arthur. When Mr. Harmon decided to criticize the comments made by Prime Minister Ras Gonzalez, if you can recall, Mr. Arthur came out and said, look, this thing is in the domain of the leadership, the political leadership of the Caribbean. And you, Mr. Harmon, should not be making any comments here. I think him as a utensil.
Yes.
So what happened afterwards? Yes, the utensil spoke, and then Mr. Granger came out and he said clearly, in no uncertain terms, that Mr. Harmon was speaking for him. And he defended everything that Mr. Harmon said. So here is Mr. Granger, who continues to be behind the scenes, brief his lieutenants and his captains, send them out to do their mischief, and then is ready to defend them when they're cornered. Who's the leader? Who's the architect?
Correct.
Granger's on record as saying on his first visit to the CARICOM at the recount, what did he say? CARICOM is the legitimate interlocutor.
Correct.
I will follow, me and my government, we will follow and we will respect the results. And then of recent you hear, we will respect the results once it is in accordance with the laws. They keep changing, and he's the one who's making all the changes.
Well, I'm sure as of their release today, that narrative has changed. That
Exactly.
they're gonna accept as long as it's accordance with their translation, their interpretation of the law.
Their interpretation. Here we go again.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you, Mr. Phillips has raised something very important. Today, the release from APNU AFC is riddled with threats, is riddled with a lot of dangerous signals for the people of this country. In this press release of today, the APNU AFC, headed by David Granger, has said that they will they will only accept a result from GCOM if that result says it is APNU AFC. They have said, if you read between the lines, ladies and gentlemen, they're saying that they're not willing to accept any other result. And today we have Mr. Phillips here, who is the prime ministerial candidate, very well prime minister-elect. That the PPPC would have won these last elections. Sir, but when you read the statement and you were seeing between the lines that they're saying that they will only accept a APNU AFC win, what does that tell you, sir? Is this a desperation? Is this a despotic move? What is it telling you, sir?
Well, it is desperation on behalf of the coalition, but more than that, we have a political organization that agreed to go to an elections in keeping with the democratic values, democratic norms that Guyana signed on to, and Guyana's been observing. Because, you know, we want to be accepted as a modern or perhaps a postmodern state, a civilized state, you know, and be a player in regional organizations that hold highly those values of democracy, you know, respect for the rule of law and respect for the will of the people. And here we have a political organization, the APNU AFC, that was properly elected in an election that was considered free and fair in 2015. They're in government from then to now. We're not going to discuss the no confidence motion, etc. yet. But then we had another election on the 2nd of March, and they lost that elections. And they're refusing to demit office, and therefore, by doing that, they cast this whole country, this whole state of Guyana, in disrepute.
Correct.
This is the government who told us that over the last 5 years, from the time they were elected in 2015, they have returned respect internationally for Guyana. And this same government that has the entire hemisphere concerned about what is happening in Guyana. This is the same government that has brought us into a stage of disrepute.
Right.
We are now the country that everybody's concerned about. Are we retrograde then in terms of not progressing and having democracy becoming stronger? We move from a fragile democracy to one that is more acceptable and that will get stronger as we go along. You know, here's the country that has taken several steps backward in its democratic process. This is a country today where the leadership of the government, who having lost an election, continue to cling on to government, but is telling the world that they're not prepared to respect the rule of law.
Right.
If you're not prepared to respect the rule of law, you're destroying this country. You're taking us into another zone. You're taking us into a dictatorial frame of governance, something that we consider to be in our past.
Right. Well, sir, I'll have you know that as of today, I have said openly on air, and I posted it on my social media feed, that given this press release from the APNO AFC today is an announcement that a dictatorship has been formed in Guyana. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the press release also says that the APNO AFC is unwilling to accept anything that they don't agree with. In other words, any vote that is valid or invalid must only be decided at Congress Place. And if you have any problems with that, you can go take it wherever you want. And in addition, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Phillips, they said the following: the APNO AFC coalition, with a view to maintaining stability and peace, remains open to dialogue. Sir, I view this as a threat that if you don't come to dialogue, there can be consequences. I would respect your view as an army man, former army man, but sir, these kinds of statements do no good to a population that since 141 days ago has done everything to stay in peace and calm and brotherhood and unity. What's your thought on this statement, sir?
First of all, I wish to commend the Guyanese people for being peaceful, for being calm up to now. And I wish to now appeal to the Guyanese people to continue to be peaceful and continue to be calm, because this is a struggle. This is a struggle to maintain democracy in Guyana. And the APNU AFC will not win. I can assure you that the APNU AFC will not win this struggle, because no dictatorial government will rule this country. And if they try, they're not going to do it for long. They have to budge, because the people in Guyana from 1992, they have tasted democracy.
Right.
Before, and then we had a set of rigging of elections that caused the PNC to be in power for 28 years. And we have experienced autocratic rule, authoritarian rule by the PNC. 1992 was the signal of return to democracy in Guyana. And we have a whole population, a young people, right?
Right.
around the 1990s or the late 1980s, and the only thing they know is a democratic Guyana. And these young people will not, and as you know young people better than I do, they will not be part of any dictatorial rule in Guyana. So if APNU AFC feels that their supporters will support them in the dictatorial rule, many of their supporters will soon come out and start questioning their motives, if it hasn't happened yet. And I can assure you that it starts happening already, and more will come out, because Guyana will have to be a democracy. We'll have to continue as a democracy.
True. And Mr. Phillips, just to let the viewers and listeners know, ladies and gentlemen, this is the second time in Guyana's history, post-independence history, that Guyana's election has become a matter of discussion at organizations like the OAS. It was during the former PNC days when the matter came up to CARICOM, and mind you, CARICOM will be meeting again in a couple of days to discuss the Guyana situation. Yesterday's meeting was the OAS. So ladies and gentlemen, CARICOM in the 1980s, late 1980s, had to decide. Dame Eugenia Charles led a motion to CARICOM to cast Guyana out of that body. It was CARICOM that led a delegation that helped to bring democracy into place. Ladies and gentlemen, it is CARICOM that helped to ensure that certain things are in place to get your votes and my votes counted, that led to the 1992 elections, the first free and fair elections post-independent Guyana. So we must not forget these things. Mr. Phillips, I hate to bring this to your attention, sir, and I do not necessarily seek your comment on it, but it is something in public place, and I would like to raise it, given that your former days, glorious days in the Army, sir. Do we have to wonder if a notification will come out tomorrow, next day, or another day to throw Mr. Mark Phillips under some proverbial bus? Like what we have seen, Mr. Joe Singh was accused by the Brigadier David Granger's Facebook page to say Joe Singh was in charge of something with the ballot boxes, admin office, and he was in charge, and it was fetched there. And Mr. Carl Morgan was thrown under the green and yellow bus again when the Brigadier David Granger's page said that it was Carl Morgan was the admin officer in charge when those boys were shot and killed in the quarantine. Sir, as a former Army head, a chief of staff, is this right? Is this fit and proper? Is this the way Army officers do things to release this kind of thing? And mind you, sir, I say so with the following conviction, that Mr. David Granger was running this country as president for 5 years. He could have had a commission of inquiry, and if Mr. Joe Singh and Carl Morgan were so guilty, could have dealt with them condignly following a commission of inquiry. Over to you, sir.
Well, look, Guyanese have a saying that you can't go to crab dance without getting mud on your foot.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot be in the struggle for democracy to ensure that democracy prevail in Guyana, and don't expect that the APNU AFC, who wants to remain in power by undemocratic means, will not want to take jabs at me. I'm ready for all the jabs. I don't have a problem. I am steadfast in what I'm doing. Okay, as I said before in my opening, in a former life, I was in the military. Today, I'm a politician. And I'm ready. I'm ready for whatever jobs they want to throw at me. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm on the right side of the law. And I said it clear, respect for the rule of law, respect the will of the people, upholding democracy. And if they want to fight me for my views on that, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Thank you,
there
sir.
are many others out there like me who share a similar view. Some of them may not be so vocal. They may be quiet, not so vocal, but we are all in this struggle because we know that if development is to take place in an even manner for all Guyanese, we have to preserve democracy in Guyana.
And sir, if I may, thank you very much for joining us here in room 592. The timing of the change of the Army's head in the midst of when the selection process is still incomplete. Your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I would tell you, don't let us get too caught up with the timings because there's a lot of speculation. The fact is, Granger is still the president, and he will be the president until we transition to another president. And as long as he's the president, he's still the commanding chief of the armed forces. He's still the chairman of the defense board, and he still has the authority to make changes in the army. What happened is that you had a chief of staff who had 10 months pre-retirement leave. And what Mr. Granger did, he selected someone, he promoted him to brigadier, and he placed him not as substantive chief of staff, but as acting chief of staff. And you realize what that action caused. It caused the reporters to question why a similar action was not taken in the police force, because we have a commissioner of police who has outstanding leave, which can take him to his retirement age. And why isn't he standing there? What Mr. Granger told everybody, oh, the commissioner of police, they're running some special assignment, So here we go again. You say one thing and do one thing. You say one thing and do something else.
Have you hazarded a guess as to what that
The
special
same thing will
operation
happen
is?
in all two forces.
You have any idea what that special operations are?
I don't know. I tell you, I became a politician and I gave up all my linkages. And I know sometime in the past, recent past, they had some posts on social media saying that some officers are still close to me, and they still have strong linkage. But I wish to use this opportunity to tell the whole leadership of the APNU, including Mr. Granger, that I do not have any strong linkages and any deep interest in what is happening in the terms of the internal affairs of the Guyana Defense Force, because we have an organizational culture that all of us, observe. When you retire, you move on. And all you do is you give your blessings to whoever is in charge and whoever continues to serve in the military.
And a straight-up question, sir.
Criticizing the military.
A straight-up question, sir. Do you believe that the Army will go by the rule of law? Let's assume that there's a declaration in favor of Air Finale.
The Army that I left will observe the rule of law. And as I tell you before, just now, that I have lost a lot of contact, but I am still confident that once the Army that I left, when I retired, once they continue to observe the organizational culture, they will continue to be subjected to civilian control of the military. So it's just a matter of changing the leadership from one president to another president. Civilian control of the military in a democratic state is what we hold high, Lito. We pride ourselves with being the only military in the continent of South America that never challenged, never overthrew the government, and is totally subjected to civilian control of the military. And I have not have any reason so far to see any changes in that stance. And in fact, in all fairness to the new brigadier who's the acting chief of staff, in his first statement, he mentioned that the Guyana Defense Force will continue to support and defend the democratic state of Guyana. Democracy in Guyana. He's on record saying that.
What is so different about Brigadier Mark Phillips? that he did not earn the favor of Mr. Granger's tenure to have been chosen to be given an office somewhere like other former and retired Army persons that have been populating various boards and various positions in this country?
You know, let me be truthful in answering that question. I have never put myself in a position to accept any appointment. Okay? And I know that Mr. Granger himself would have sent a message to me, right? And I suspected it was for us to discuss possible appointment, and I more or less ignored the message. I'm a because I was not interested in working after I retire. Okay. I had some domestic commitments that I felt was more important for me. I have a father who was there with me 36 years throughout my military career. Of course, he was there with me from birth, but through my military career, he was a source of inspiration to me. And I felt that when I retire, you know, because he was, you know, had some health challenges, yeah, felt that I must commit myself to, you know, his support and his care. And I did that until his demise in 2019.
Thank you, sir.
And that freed me, right, to make me available for public office again.
Correct.
And I was contacted in I think December 2019, and I had the options, and then I made a decision, and I accepted what was offered.
Thank you, sir.
In all fairness to the government, I don't think that they try to sideline me. It's a case of me not wanting to go to work.
Gotcha. Well, you know, I could have come back there and say, had you taken a position with them, what would have been your...
Well, you can ask him.
Exactly. It would have been difficult. I must tell you, had I taken a position, it would have been difficult.
Correct. Now, sir, I want to ask you, because a lot of persons who have never belonged to the Army cannot understand the culture. And a lot of us find it difficult that persons who we view as the population as having good training, good background, being part of an army, having all kinds of decency and integrity one would accrue to such a position, that persons who are former Army personnel in public positions drawing from the public purse, you are no longer Army, you are drawing from the public purse, that you would allow what is going on to continue to go on without speaking out? Is it because David Granger is a former Army man? Had David Granger been a Barrett Jagdee or somebody else, would they have spoken out? What is the culture there that is causing all of these Army people, former Army people who hold position in government, to stay mum while they continue to drink from the public cup, to eat from the public purse?
Now, well, you know, if you hold a position in government, how would you criticize the government? The government pay you, and you criticize the government? This is a small country, big America. In America, people in government, they hold government office, they don't criticize the government. When they leave office, then they criticize the government. All the people in America who are critical of the government, they're not in uniform. They're now happily retired.
But Mr. Phillips, shouldn't that culture change? I tell you what, a lot of times I have come under attack. Kaito Radio comes under attack every day, that it is this government that give you this radio station and you ought to shut up because you didn't get it from the former one. Why are you criticizing them? There has to come a time when integrity becomes the most important thing for a nation's goodness. So when you guys get into government, are we to expect as a population that if you employ Leonard Gildarie and you do dishonest stuff, that Leonard Gildarie should continue earning his purse and stay silent? That cannot be something that we can accept, sir.
Well, you know, it's a norm. And it's not only in Guyana. So don't let's beat up Guyana for that. If you're in the employ of the state working for the government, you don't find people criticizing the government. You know, some people see it as an indecent thing to do. What they will do, if things are going wrong, they will be very objective, perhaps write a report to their superior, quietly, but they don't go openly to the public and be very critical of the government. You know, they do the investigations, they write a report, and the report is, you know, dealt within a confidential manner, and then opportunities to take corrective actions, you know, are employed or done, you know. But if you feel strongly that you're seeing these things and, you know, you report it and it continues to happen, the proper thing to do is to resign. You could resign. And we have seen other people, we've seen people done that in other countries, and to some extent in Guyana too. You know, people resign or they wait until they retire and then they become very vocal.
Let us agree to disagree on that for now. We'll come back to it because I tell you what, the PPP was voted out of office because a lot of persons decided that they were going to stand up and speak out. It might be a lot of persons who became disillusioned. It might be a lot of persons who lost their touch with the public purse that started to speak out, but persons started to speak out. And this government would not have been brought down if persons continue to draw from public purse and stayed quiet. It is expected, I believe, as a nationalist, I would want to stand up and speak out when something goes against the grain. But we'll come to that. Sir, I want to talk to you about something that is eating away at the core of this nation. At the core of this current political problem that we have is being played the race card. As of last week, people who are close to the incumbent, in fact, their spokespersons, Mr. LNP or other names that they might have, they were saying that the world is coming out against Granger because he is an Afro-Guyanese. Sir, I cannot believe that in this day and time, we are willing to subvert the will of the electorate for the sake of race, or to forego decency, integrity, and honesty because you think, or somebody, not you, somebody thinks, well, Irfan Ali is not Afro-Guyanese or Mr. Granger is not Indo-Guyanese. Sir, I don't know, and Yog Mahadeo doesn't care what race you are, but you must be aware of this paradigm in Guyana. What does Brigadier Mark Phillips, Prime Minister-elect, say to this nation that is so presently caught up, well, not the nation, sorry, the APNO AFC people that is so presently caught up to think that everybody who speaks out against APNO AFC is speaking out against Afro-Guyanese?
Well, I'm an Afro-Guyanese, this is the first thing I need to say. I cannot change that. I'm a very Afrocentric Afro-Guyanese, and that will not change. However, where I will part company is that I am not going to support a political party or a leader solely based on race. That is dangerous. Because telling me that if I support you based on race and you appeal for my support based on race, any transgression of the rule of law, I must accept it. I must stomach it. Any infringement of our democratic values, I must accept it. Because what you're doing it for me and you and for our race. Any, like disrespect for the will of the people, I must accept it because it's a race thing. And you know what? If we are to approach our politics purely along racial lines, it will take us nowhere proper, because Guyana will not change. Guyana will remain a multiracial society. And what needs to be changed is the way the major political party do business in Guyana. The leadership, their membership, and everything. And I think the APNU AFC, the nucleus that it continues to hold on to this race, issue is the PNC. And the PNC has a history of appealing to race when they were rigging the elections. Okay? And we have gone past that. And in all fairness to the PNC has members who are non-African. What are they telling the members who are non-African? Right? Likewise, the PPP, they have members who are non-Indian. Okay? So while race, because of a historical context, has been a part of our politics, we have to rise above that. The leadership has to rise above that. And accept that we live in a multi-ethnic society, and that is a strength. It's not a weakness. Multi-ethnicity is a strength for Guyana. Look back and see all the development in Guyana. It is based on the fact that we are a multi-ethnic society. And we cannot use every 5 years where we have elections and we have a strained elections period to appeal to race. And then when we form the government, then we gone back and everybody must work together, right? So we leaders, as political leaders, we must fight this racial cleavage in terms of our politics. We must promote multi-ethnicity, because more and more every day, if you look at the slate of the PPPC, I am proud of the slate of the PPPC. I am seeing Guyana. When I look at the list and the photographs of everybody who are the candidates of the PPPC, I am seeing Guyana, the Guyana that I want to see.
Right. So Mr. Phillips, I want to just deliberate a little bit more. Viewers and listeners, I would dare say, Leonard, correct me if I'm wrong, it would have been under the previous government, not the current one, under the previous government, that the Ethnic Relations Commission would have taken birth. And ladies and gentlemen, in all of the discussion, Mr. Phillips is right. We cannot ignore our history. But in choosing to not ignore our history, we also need to have somebody like the ERC, commissions like the ERC, create more open dialogue. In other words, we need to face these ghosts, not the ghosts that APNU AFC are pulling out of Mingo's SOP, but the ghosts of our past, and address them and deal with them. Because if we don't put it to rest, we will live a horrible future always reliving who's to be blamed and what is to be blamed. We got to address these things. And ladies and gentlemen, it is expected, Mr. Phillips, that the ERC mandate must be relooked at under the PPPC administration and really start to create a dialogue in this country addressing past ethnic and ethnocentric actions and holding open commissions, open inquiries on them to ensure they're documented and put to rest. It is enough for this nation to be dealing with these things time and again. Sir, to come back to the matter of race, you are the Prime Minister. You said that you entered into politics in January 2020. You're a baby in politics, sir. As a baby in politics with a history, knowing Guyana's ethnic insecurities, have you seen anything in the party that you now support, for which you're Prime Minister candidate, that drives any concern in your mind of ethnic bias?
Look, the PPPC is a party, the membership, the support is predominantly Indian Guyanese. That's a fact. The APNU is predominantly African Guyanese. That's a fact. And there's a historical reason for that we don't need to go back into. However, what is important as we speak now is if you check the manifesto of these two parties, the coalition, the APNU-FC coalition, and the PPPC, and the smaller parties, and all the manifestos of all the parties that contested the election talks about multi-ethnic policies, you know, racial cohesion, ethnic cohesion, development of Guyana for all Guyanese. That is a good start. I don't see that as hypocrisy. That is a good start. What we need is for our leaders, right, to use that as we move forward. Don't worry the detractors, the L, we call it the L, right? Those youngsters, they're there for a reason, right? They're directed by someone, and you expect anything to come from them. But we know different. It's because they have lost the elections, because the entire world is harping and urging them to do the right thing.
Right.
To remain a democracy and to leave office. And therefore, you will have these cheap appeals, you know, to race and all these things and so.
Is Mr. Mark Phillips going to be a holder of an office or an energetic shaper of Guyana's future destiny as Prime Minister, sir? Are you just going to be a face in an office, or do you plan to get yourself actively involved?
Well, if you really know me, I don't like offices, you know. I think the office is there for a purpose, but it's not to make me comfortable and complacent. I prefer to be out in the fields, meeting the people, you know, seeing the problems that the people have out there, remain connected with them, and work with them towards improving their lot. That's why I entered politics, not to sit in an office and to enjoy the comforts of an office. I already have that at home, you know? So yeah. I'm interested in office. In fact, if you want to give me a tent, like how Gaddafi operated years ago, somewhere in the jungle, I will take the tent and I will operate from there.
If it's one thing I could say that a lot of people hope for is when the government changed, you know, all of this road blockages every time Parliament is in session will be relooked at, and all of these sirens, oh my God, every time a police or an army or a person moves somewhere, the entire country has to move out. Anyway, I'm not going to carry on.
Guyana is a poor country. Guyana is a poor country. Yes, we have oil, but we're still a poor country. And I don't want to be a high maintenance Prime Minister.
Somebody really wanted to ask if the good former army chief would have been a Robert Stamper. I'm not going to ask that question. What I want to ask...
I was a low maintenance former army chief too.
I'm not going to ask that question. What I'm going to ask you, sir, is what's your opinion of Keith Lowenfield, a former army guy, and also by extension, as you on the floor, about the performance of the GCOM chair?
Well, I tell you what, Keith Lowenfield is my colleague. He joined the army before me, but we served together as junior officers in the same unit and as senior officers, you know, in the same headquarters. And I must tell you that I have a lot of respect for Mr. Keith Lowenfield as a colleague, a fellow patriot, you know, who served in the military. I have a lot of respect for Mr. Lowenfield as he approached his work. But the point of departure came when Mr. Lowenfield chose to not do what he was expected to do in keeping with the laws of Guyana. If you're a professional and you have a job to do and it is set out in regulations as what you're expected to do, follow the regulations and deliver. You cannot be a professional up to a certain point and then you suddenly decide that you want to be a part of the APNU AFC rigging group and expect me to support you on that. So there is a point where Mr. Lowenfield chose to go rogue, and that is the point of departure where I decided that I have to be critical of Mr. Lowenfield, because I will not support any unprofessional behavior or action by Mr. Lowenfield. So
right.
I clears up the point.
To rehash one of the earlier points, you see my point about the loyalty issue. Mr. Lowenfield is obviously being loyal to some puppet master or paymaster, and so he's not speaking out. And we would want him to really do the right thing. Sir, under the PPP government, under the PPPC
Claudette
government.
Singh, my apologies. Could he respond to the Claudette Singh question?
Yes.
Well, personally, I have no criticism to date for the Honorable Justice Claudette Singh, right? I mean, I hear a lot of, I don't want to repeat what people are saying around me, but I think she's a strong woman. She used to be referred to as the Iron Lady, and I still see her the Iron Lady, as the Iron Lady, and she will take us to stage 4. She will take us to stage 4.
Did she miss some opportunities, sir?
For the court, once the matter is before the court, who better than Justice Singh knows what is required of her? If the matter is before the court, she has to wait until the litigation in the court is concluded before she take her next step. So I respect her, and there's been no reason for me so far to have any belief whatsoever that she will not follow the rule of law.
Hadn't it been Prime Minister-elect that is speaking to us today, had it been private citizen, Mark Phillips, would that view still be held, sir?
Yes, because can you show me any instance where she had violated the laws so far?
Well, a lot of citizens, the reason I ask you that, sir, a lot of citizens, and this is in no way attacking the good lady, but a lot of citizens have felt that there were moments and times when the chairman could have been proactive. Look, we have a situation here, Mr. Phillips, where I'm hoping that the chairman will realize that this circus, this thing is a never-ending, vicious cycle. After this case goes to the CCJ, they're going to bring another one. And then as of today, APNU AFC has said to her, unless you're willing to declare APNU AFC, we're not going to accept a declaration. So the question is she now going to continue to wait? Because no court has put a stay or has locked her down. In fact, today, Leonard, in the management hearing there today, nothing was mentioned as to whether GCOM should have a stay or whether there is an undertaking from GCOM.
Well, but you know, that has been the practice of GCOM. In all fairness to the GCOM, you know, that's been the practice from the time the litigation started.
Correct.
Shown respect to the court.
But let me push you on this.
It's difficult for them not to show respect now.
Undoubtedly, sir. You are an army man, and a man comes and he's on the attack and you're on the defense. How long are you going to be in the defense? There is one day you will have to reverse engineer your thinking. And Madam Chairman has to one day realize, I cannot sit by and allow this never-ending vicious cycle to continue on and on. As I said, Brigadier, it was said at the OAS yesterday, this likely round might end 1st of September, then another round would start, and if Madam Chairman chooses to always say, as long as there's a court case, I'm not going to move, remember, she is not fettered by a court. I hear you, sir. I hear you, and I respect you. But I'm just telling you what the population at this stage feel, and maybe I'm saying it to the Madam Chairman herself. Madam, if you can hear, we are getting restless as a population because we need to put this behind us. And we certainly feel that with APNU AFC statement today, you need to get on with your work, your mandate for the laws of this country. And I say so very, very, very respectfully, Madam Claudette Singh. Mr. Phillips, coming back to you, sir. Soku and Sarah, or Sarah, right? That's the name, Sarah and Soku. Sir, under the PPPC, would Soku and Sarah be playing the role they're playing now of having cost a state almost $1 billion with nothing to show for it? Or are these entities going to be totally revamped and reshaped?
Well, I can tell you about Soku because I was sort of remember the GDF when Soku was established. And as you know, the force head of Soku used to be one of my subordinate officers. When he retired, he transitioned the head of SOCU. So I'm aware of what SOCU was set up to do. I wouldn't go into much details, but I can tell you up front that with a change of government, there was an obvious change in the operations of SOCU. And a lot of Guyanese became critical of SOCU because, you know, as they're saying is that, look, SOCU was not doing, with the change of government, SOCU started getting into areas that they were not established to operate in. SARA started under this government. I don't know much about SARA.
Yeah, they were supposed, I think,
but from a management standpoint, I can tell you that we're to set up an agency, you know, whether you're in opposition or you're in government, everybody would want value for the money. And perhaps when we establish these agencies, what is important, and many times we don't do it, we need to have a strong measurement and evaluation mechanism. You know, it's not for them to just write reports every month or every quarter or every year, but we must have an independent body. You know, we must approach, you did management, we must approach things from a management standpoint, you know, and, you know, Peter Drucker is on record as saying, the late Peter Drucker, if it can be measured, it can be managed. And I'm saying that we need measurement and evaluation. These are modern techniques in management. And had we done that from the establishment of SARA, we would have known before that SARA, you know, may not have been serving the purpose it was set up to serve, and we could have been taking the corrective measures long before now. You take 5 years, 4 years, 5 years to tell us that SARA spent over $600 million and, you know, there's nothing to show for their work. Come on. A proper measurement and evaluation mechanism would have told us that from year one, what needs to be adjusted, what needs to be changed in order to make SARA more effective and perhaps more efficient in the work.
Right.
And sir, if I may, is there a plan, does the PPP have a plan if the coalition does not recognize a declaration which puts Irfan Ali as the president of Guyana and the PPP in power?
Well, the PPP plan is unveiling right before you. We have this whole issue in the regional, hemispheric, and international domain.
No, I'm talking a specific case. There is a declaration, and the coalition says we are not recognizing that, as can be evidenced or reflected in that statement that was issued today.
Well, that is an area that none of us wants to get into, where we will have a government after the declaration of the winner refusing to demit office. That is really the lowest that we can ever go as a nation.
I want to read you my apologies.
The issue is not whether the PPP has a plan. The PPP already have a plan that is in the public domain. The entire world is looking at what is happening in Guyana. So the onus is on the PPP alone. The onus is on the APNUAFC. The onus is on CARICOM. The onus is on the OAS, the Commonwealth, you know. And if they continue in office after declaration has been made saying that the PPPC won the elections, the sanctions that started with revocation of visas will be expanded. Guyana will suddenly wake up a morning and there's no developmental aid. There's no bridge finance. This is for many programs for the budget cycle. And those pressures, as you know, we are not a Venezuela. We now start producing oil. Venezuela, it took 10 years before the sanctions start taking effect in Venezuela. You know why? Because Venezuela was a rich country, petrodollars flowing. Our petrodollars now start flowing, but it's in a bank somewhere, and none of us can touch it as yet.
A follow-up there, sir. A follow-up. Quickly, Yog. I want to read a part of the statement today that was issued, and if you guys would have missed it, our listeners and viewers, the APNO FC would have issued a statement, and this paragraph, very important. The APNO FC coalition is resolved to ensure that fraudulent votes cannot be factored in to represent the will of the electorate. Any attempt to include a fraudulent vote in a declaration, that's in single uplifted quotes, will constitute a violation of the Constitution and the fundamental principles of democracy. We maintain that the Elections Commission can only make a declaration based on the valid votes. This seems to be the feeling, the mood of the APNU coalition. Do you believe this is something they will take into next week after the court case? And what then?
The APNU AFC, they have like about 6 lawyers in the cabinet, right? 5 or 6 lawyers in the cabinet. And if they choose to put together that statement and communicate it to the leadership, who am I to feel, timid by such a statement? I already said that we are on the right side of the law.
Right.
You're not fearful of any statement that ACNU is making, like you just read out, because you know what? The entire world is looking, right? When the Chief Justice make her ruling, everybody in ACNU who sit down and put together a statement know fully well that the only recourse that they have, if they're so aggrieved, is to compile all those allegations and anomalies that they have and go before a court in the form of a petition. The Constitution of Guyana dictates that. The Representation of the People's Act dictates that. So if they want to put aside all those laws of Guyana and put out a statement like that, they continue to confuse their supporters. Perhaps the statement is to keep the supporters mobilized, I don't know. But the rule of law will prevail. And let us be confident, let us remain confident that the rule of law will prevail.
Well, sir, I mean, to that point, I believe we'll have to take the discussion, and I'm certainly looking forward to have an engagement with the opposition leader, General Secretary of the PAP, sooner rather than later,
Exactly.
to invite him to discuss these strategies, because your party, and I don't want to put you on a spot, but one would envisage that with all these permutations working out, he would certainly want to think of certain positions he can offer the people. Because you see, sir, the problem we have is that while Granger et al. Twiddle their thumb, Guyana is sinking and sinking rapidly. Babies are without food as we speak. People's homes are there, and the whole thing is running haywire. Sir, I want to just quickly come back to a little bit of governance and good governance, and also a bit of your presidential candidate. When Mr. Mark Phillips was invited to the PPP to be its prime ministerial candidate, from then to now, 7 months would have passed, sir. What is Mr. Mark Phillips' conclusion of the gentleman named Mohammed Irfan Ali?
I see a young, enthusiastic, and brilliant leader who has experience in government and who's ready to do great things for Guyana. That's what I see, and I'm ready to support him.
Thank you. Thank you. And sir, is Mr. Mark Phillips, are you going to oppose Mr. Irfan Ali if you disagree with policies or measures or recommendations he will have as a president and you are prime minister? I mean, it might be in the privacy of your offices there and your meetings and cabinet, but are you the type of person that will speak up and speak out even if you disagree with your boss, so to speak?
But that is in my nature, and I don't see myself changing. I'm 58 going on 59, and I don't see myself changing now. It's avenue for objective discussions, will always have to be there if I'm to feel free and to operate as I expect to be operating as a prime minister.
Thank you, sir. And sir, with regards to the areas of the geography of Guyana, being part of the Army, you would have, of course, be very cognizant of our geographical challenges, regional challenges in terms of the terrain. Are you comfortable to direct your government as to the areas more likely to need governmental attention, notwithstanding whatever and whoever is the population there?
Certainly, yeah. In terms of infrastructural development, improving lines of communication, but at the same time, we have to continue to place importance on environmental, conservation. Okay. And, the reality of Guyana is that 90% of the people live on 10% of the land, so to speak. Most of the people live along the coastline and we have the interior. Okay. But it's important that we improve the lines of communication to our people in the interior, because we have to develop the interior of Guyana, right? We don't just have to extract the minerals from the interior. We have to bring development to the communities in the interior. Mm-hmm. They have to get good schools. And when I say good school, not just a building, we have to staff the schools with the teachers, with the necessary ICT, and keep our people connected. Connectivity, right up your alley, is important for us as a nation if we're to develop. This COVID-19 has showed us what ICT can do for us.
Correct.
Here we're having a meeting, I'm at home, you're at home, and the entire world is listening to us. These are the technologies that we have to leverage, so we have to bridge the divide. So an Amerindian community in the interior must be able to communicate with us real time.
Correct. And to that point, sir, I would certainly, if Mr. Jagde was sitting where you are, I think he would have told me that I would know the answer better. But, because you are not him, I can say this. I certainly hope that when the PPPC gets into office, this thing about ICT is not another lip service, because Guyana badly needs a total revisitation of the entire ICT planning. Whatever we have had up to the end of last year cannot work anymore, and successive governments have promised to free up the whole ICT, the whole arena, that whole area. The industry itself can grow and grow rapidly. So I certainly hope that you guys would be paying keen attention there. I want to talk a little bit, sir, about Mark Phillips's ability, or not ability, your interest in reaching out to the other side, sir. If you can take a minute, take whatever time you want, and speak to your opponents who are presently backing APNU's APNU AFC, sir. Talk to them as you would wish.
Look, I'm into politics because I have a deep interest in the development of Guyana. I'm a people's person, and we have all committed ourselves in the PPPC that once we win these elections, we want to develop this country. Our plans, our projects and programs is aimed at developing this country for all Guyanese. All Guyanese must participate, all hands on deck. Our manifesto is quite clear, written in simple language, and we're talking about development. We're talking about jobs, we're talking about health, we're talking about housing for all Guyanese. And in fact, if you look at the housing programs and the projects that the PPP had for the last 10 years of the PPP office, many Guyanese throughout the length and breadth of Guyana, of all races, would have benefited from the housing. And the same person who was the architect and the leader in the success of that housing project will become the next president of Guyana. So we, together with our cabinet, will be taking development to a higher level. And we already said, both Dr. Ifanali and myself, that we cannot develop Guyana only with our supporters. Once we get into office, We will be appealing, we'll be reaching out to the APNU AFC supporters and to the leadership to be part of this developmental trust for Guyana. In our manifesto, we mention the whole issue about electoral reform and constitutional reform. What we're saying at the end, at the finality of this democratic process, all these talks and these meetings and discussions will lead to the formulation of policies and perhaps even amendment to our constitution must start. But we're not going to negotiate with a knife to our necks. We're not going to negotiate with a cabal that wants to hold on to power after losing an election. Right. Let the declaration be done and we sworn in, because we know we're the winners of these elections. The declaration, as I said yesterday, is just a formality. And once that is done, we are willing to speak with everybody in the APNU AFC. So all this talk about inclusive governance and shared governance and everything, it will take place, but after the declaration of the elections.
Thank you, sir.
We're not going to negotiate on the duress.
We are not going to negotiate on the duress. Well said, sir. Well spoken, like former chief of staff speaking. We are not going to negotiate on the duress. And I think a lot of persons feel for you and with you and the People's Progressive Party Civic, but not just yourself. ANOG, TCI, TNM, all of the stakeholders in these elections. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you that it is not the virtue or not the fact alone that PPPC would have won these elections. But the fact is APNU AFC have lost these elections and have lost to a combination of things here. And the winners ought to have been all of Guyana. Nobody wanted to ridicule APNU AFC. Nobody wanted to put them in a position of shame or embarrassment. People win and lose elections. The PPP themselves lost the 2015 election, but they have bounced right back. And so we had expected that APNU AFC could have known that they could bounce right back at the 2025 election. What they're doing there, we don't know. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we are going to wrap up our show in short order, I want to just remind you that tomorrow at 1:30, Mr. Leonard Gildarie will once again be leading the Elections Watch COVID Watch. Leonard?
Yes, absolutely. Many things to discuss, like including we will have to be talking about what transpired today with regard to the case management. But of course, we continue to assess that statement that came out and a couple of other things. The COVID-19 is something that we have not paid much attention to in the last couple of days. Much suffering, Yog. A lot of people complaining, so we got to get back to that COVID-19. And as I have the floor, if I may ask the good sir, somebody's asking, and they say that you look like a teacher who used to bend down them back in the days. But aside from that, could you tell us whether you would accept or you would like a situation, or you would endorse a situation if you have no choice of having overseas forces here if the situation gets or goes south?
Well, overseas forces, you're talking about overseas forces to do what?
Well, there's a refusal by the coalition to give up power.
Look, from my training, Leonard, I can tell you that we're far from that. Okay, I'm not being complacent, but I can tell you we're far from where overseas boots will have to come on from. Okay, fine, you know, it happened in the 60s, but remember, we were still a colony. We were part of an empire. Okay, so if there's a problem in one part of the empire and the police force could not have coped, you know, the British had a regiment that could have just sailed down to Guyana or fly down to Guyana, okay? We already have our local boots, the Guyana Defense Force, and the Guyana Defense Force, part of the role of the Guyana Defense Force is to support the civil authorities. If there's any disturbance in Guyana, the Guyana police force is expected, right, to bring order, and the Guyana Defense Force will support the police force when the police force asks for assistance. What is important is whatever these two forces do, they do it in keeping with the laws of Guyana. And they only follow lawful orders. That is important. Right. So that's what I'm saying. We're far from having any boots on the ground, right? And there's no country is gonna just put people in a plane and just fly them into Guyana, right? To deal with a local situation in Guyana that they feel that the local police and the local defense force should first have an opportunity of maintaining order and in Guyana. So right. I'm deliberately using simple language and not using any technical language for the people of Guyana to understand.
Got you. And
Guyana, so we have a Guyana police force. As far as I'm concerned, it's still professional, right? There's still a lot of professional people there. We have a Guyana Defense Force. There's still professional people there. The Chief of Staff acting is on record of saying that he supported democratic governance in Guyana, right? And, you know, he will support the police force, you know, once they make a call for assistance, right? Those are what are expected in a situation. And I can tell you, notwithstanding the communique or the release from the APNU AFC, right? We are far from that.
Gotcha. So, sir, one could also counter, while I'm not asking for your comment on it, one could also counter to say that that's why APNU AFC can decide to prolong this as long as possible, because they see that there is no real repercussions other than the international community says sanction, sanction, sanction. But I want to take you somewhere else, sir. Your former colleague, did Mr. Brigadier Mark Phillips, did the former Chief of Staff think of, or did you do it? Did you ever make a call to Mr. Keith Lowenfield, say, hey, what's going on there, man? Why don't you get this thing done in the right way? Did you call Mr. Lowenfield, your former colleague, sir, or can you?
No, I did not call him, and I choose not to call him because I'm in the leadership of a political party, and I use the forum available to me, the public forum, to let him know exactly how I feel about his actions. There's no need for me to call him. He's already aware through public domain.
Correct. The reason I asked you
disagree with his actions.
But the reason I asked you, and it is something that I'm sure your party would be considering, sir, that, sir...
Oh, and before you go, Yog, before you go, I also want to mention that some of his colleagues, led by one Lieutenant Colonel George Gomes, right, they sent a letter saying that some of the veterans and Gomes and all these people are in support of Lowenfield. And I'm on record of one of our programs saying that I disassociate myself, and I was very critical about that letter. Because while Mr. Lowenfield may be a colleague, if he does something against the law, contrary to the laws of Guyana, we all must come out and let him know that he's wrong.
Well said, sir. Indeed, thank you. And sir, we are getting down to our program time, and I would want to hand over to you for your closing comments, if you don't mind. It's been a pleasure to have you here tonight, sir.
Yes, Dr. Yog, and to our viewers, I want to appeal to you again. I already told the world that we have the best people in Guyana who have remained calm for 141 days, notwithstanding the electoral impasse that we had to endure. You know, some people say, you know, it's like more than impasse, is obstructionism now. But I just want to appeal to the Guyanese people to continue to keep the peace, to be calm. And there's a reason why I'm making this appeal, because the rule of law will prevail. And we will reach the stage 4, where the chairperson of GCOM will make that declaration. And once that declaration is made, we will have a transition from the APNU AFC to the PPPC government. And that transition, more than likely, will have to be peaceful, because Guyana needs to be developed for all Guyanese. And I would like to play a part of the development of Guyana in the next 5 years. And it must be under democratic rule. Democracy must prevail. So let us work together, let us hold together, let us be peaceful, let us be calm, and allow democracy to prevail.
Thank you, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Brigadier Mark Phillips, Prime Minister-elect of Guyana, he said, and his desire remains, that Guyana must be developed for the benefit of all Guyanese. Mr. Phillips, thank you. It's been a great evening to have you here in room 592. Sir, I thank you for your graciousness and your outspoken and forthrightness. It's been a very, very open chat, and we appreciate your integrity and your honesty, sir, and calling it the way you see it. And we certainly hope that when you take that oath in office, we are not going to see less of you, but we are certainly going to see more of you, because then, as you know, the questions are going to get even tougher, because then we're going to question your role and your work in office. We look forward to that day, sir, and we thank you once again for joining us in room 592. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you that tomorrow night we'll be joined by no other than Mr. Freddie Kissoon to discuss some of our assumptions and presumptions and permutations of what if the Court of Appeal rules this way. As you know, Freddie Kissoon has his own, he's a political scientist, and he thinks things through in a different way than you and I might. And so we push him on it many times, but we're looking forward for a good chat with Mr. Freddie Kissoon tomorrow night. Next week, Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen, we have no other than Sir Ron Saunders joining us in room 592. And on Friday evening, that is day after tomorrow, we're going to have some members of the diaspora in room 592 to talk about Guyana's elections again. It's been great to have you, ladies and gentlemen, in room 592 tonight. We look forward to you joining us tomorrow in Elections Watch, COVID Watch. Do stay good, be safe, and remember, do a prayer for Guyana. It is still the best country in the world, and it is best, and it will be even better because of you and I and what we can do for this country. So, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe.
Thank you, Leonard Gildarie.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you, viewers, for having me. I survived 592, and I will be here again.
You did well. You did well.
Stay safe, ladies and gentlemen, and do have a great night. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
COVID-19 tips sponsored by Dex Soap. 1. Practice social distancing. 2. Wear your mask when leaving the house. 3. Wash your hands regularly for 20 seconds using our Dex Soap. 4. Cover your nose and mouth with a disposable tissue or flex elbow when you cough or sneeze. Choose Dex Soap for that extra cleanliness. Dex Soap is affordable and available nationwide.